in the front bedroom of the Hunter house, and this room is decorated like a children's room. Now, back when the house was first built by the Hunters, it was probably used more for travelers on the Saginaw Trail. We have to remember that Birmingham was 1 day away from Detroit and 1 day away from Pontiac. So people traveling on the road would need a place to stop and sleep and probably buy food. And the Hunters offered that service. So people could stop here, rest, eat, and then continue on their way. If you've ever had relatives stay over and they had to use your room, maybe that's how the Hunter children felt when the travelers stopped by for the night. You may notice that in this room there are no closets, and it's a very small bedroom. Well, remember, when we talked about spinning in the parlor, most clothes were made by hand, so children would only have 2, if they were really lucky, 3 outfits. One would be for church, and one would be for school or for chores. A lot of your clothes were also probably hand-me-downs from older brothers and sisters. Now, because of that, you would only really need 1 dresser, and you could all share a dresser because there were not that many clothes. On top of our dresser, we have some toys that children could have had at this time period. Now, do these look like toys that you have at home, or maybe a sibling or a cousin? Well, as you can see, some of these toys look very familiar, and that's because people like to play pretend even back then. This tea set, for example, would be a great way to practice for when you had guests over for tea. The only problem with this tea set is that it's made with pewter. Pewter was used a lot to make mugs and plates back in the 1800s because it's very soft and easy to work with metal. But today we know that the lead in the pewter can make you sick. That's one of the reasons why we ask you to look with your eyes and not with your hands, because if you were to touch or play with this pewter today, it could make you sick. Teddy bears are very popular today, just like they were when they were invented in 1902. Now, this teddy bear is very much like the teddy bear that one of the 4-acre children is holding in this photograph. Do you have a favorite plush toy or a favorite teddy bear? Now, this is the only children's bedroom in all the Hunter house, because at this time period, all the children would have slept in the same room. And the bedroom, again, is pretty small, and that's because bedrooms were for just changing clothes or for sleeping. You did all your other activities outside of the bedroom, either in the front parlor or outside. Children didn't hang out in their bedrooms. They didn't play video games or things like that. So you didn't really need a big room. Now, you might share a bedroom with a sibling today, but at this time period, you also shared the bed. So all the kids in one big bed. We're going to look at a decoration that may be a little bit different than things we have seen today. This is called a sampler, and this is something that a child would make. Now, when Birmingham was first settled in the 1820s, there were no schools built, so children had to be taught at home, sort of like you're being taught at home now. There were no internet or videos to help these children, so how did they learn? Well, we know that sewing was a very important skill. You had to make your own clothes. So if you could learn how to spell and learn how to do your numbers and even learn how to spell or read while you were sewing, that was a great thing to do. So a lot of these samplers had fancy stitches, so you'd learn how to sew, but you would actually make letters and numbers, and this one even has a poem. So you could learn how to read and write and spell and everything while learning how to sew. Now, this one was made by Sarah Warren in 1838 when she was 8 years old. Have you ever sewn anything? Now, families like to keep report cards and school projects and drawings, and sometimes they'll even put them up on the refrigerator, or maybe there's a special wall in the house. Well, that's what they did at this time period too. Families would take the samplers and hang them on the wall for decoration. This is how museums today are able to have beautiful things like this to show off. Now, we don't collect just fancy or expensive things. We like to collect everyday things. So you can find many items in museums that were made by children just like you. Now, here's a fun fact about the 1800s. Almost all the babies were born at home. Babies were not really born in hospitals at this time period because we didn't have hospitals like we do today. Now, in the 147 years that families lived here in the Hunter House, lots of babies were born here. One of those babies is Vern Fouracre. Here he is with a picture of his older brother, Don. He was born right here in the Hunter House. Where were you born? In your house or in a hospital? In the 1800s, children played outside a lot. And this is something that you could have to play with. This was a small bird cage that you could keep a little bird in, maybe watch it eat and drink for a couple days, but then you'd let it go. People back then didn't keep pets like we do today. So you might have a dog or a cat, but that dog or a cat is also going to be a working animal. Dogs were kept to keep you safe from wildlife and also to keep the livestock secure. Cats, of course, were kept to keep the mice out of the barn and to keep your fruits, vegetables, and grains safe. So even if you had a cat or a dog as a pet, they'd be a working cat or a dog. Right, Bella? If you have a younger sibling at home, you might recognize what this chair is. It's a potty chair. Now, potty chairs really haven't changed much in over 200 years. You have the place to go potty, and it even has a cover to go over it so it can become a small seat when you're not using it. But why would you have a potty chair in your room if you were potty trained? Well, at this time period, there weren't indoor bathrooms like we have today. People would have used what's called an outhouse, or a bathroom that's outside of the house, and you'd have to walk outside to use it. But at night, that could be dangerous because there were wild animals like wolves and snakes and real bears, not just teddy bears. You could also have really bad weather, like a blizzard or it's raining and you don't want to go out. Now, what's interesting is that even adults use something very much like this when they didn't want to go outside at night. Have you ever heard the phrase sleep tight? Well, that comes from rope beds like this one. Mattresses were held by ropes that needed to be tightened. The ropes were wrapped around the bed frame instead of having slats or a box spring. But ropes can get loose, especially when you sleep on them, and they start to sag. And if you don't tighten them, you could sink right to the floor and get stuck. So sleep tight. Make sure your ropes were nice and tight before climbing into bed. Now we're going to head off to see how the adults slept.